Hey everybody, welcome back to another update on the South African DLC for Wargame Red Dragon. So, bad news first. It's not gonna come out this month, let alone in August, or I guess in August, let alone this month, I should say, as you can read here. For various reasons, they just underestimated the workload, and August is apparently not a very productive month for them. So that is, of course, a bit unfortunate. Models are cool, of course. You know, you can here see the LTT or the Logim in action, the Leopard 2's ugly cousin. This is Roika, probably the 105 one. Gun looks like a 105mm one. In any case, they said they're more or less done with models, but they, still gotta do beta testing, etc., etc. Which should then happen fairly soon, which they'll also report on, they said. But also you can here see a bunch of fancy models. I'll obviously leave the link to this in the description. But maybe you figured this out because I have Wargame up in the background, and probably because I put it in the title. Now that I think about it, there's also a balance patch coming. Quite a substantial one, quite an impactful one. Not a huge amount of changes, but I think the changes themselves are virtually all impactful. So let's go over them, shall we? Let me just do this. So, Bluefor Commonwealth deck availability from 0, or like availability bonus from 0% to 10%. You can't see the full deck here. I'm not gonna switch scenes every time, but you will be able to see the availability on these sides. It matters definitely for infantry. Your SAS are gonna be like 9 and 7 instead of 8 and 6. Honestly, I think having one additional SAS or like one additional elite squad and one additional infantry on like basically every single card, or sometimes even 2, I think is a bit more impactful than it might look at first. Or like in general, having like literally 10% extra units, actually quite nice. Light infantry, especially if you take them in anything at 16 or higher, you will get even 2 per card extra. So that's a nice thing. It's just a nice thing to have. Basically, from every unit that has 5 availability or more, you will notice. If you downvote the track rapier FSAs, you get 7. These you will always get 1 more. You will get 7 Stormer if you downvote them. ADAS is gonna stay the same. Only the other 2 marksmen, or like the chief marksman and the centurion marksman, are gonna be affected. You get more Wolverines, you get more mortars if you downvote them. You get an additional Maxes. It's just not too shabby. It's not a huge changer. I think the biggest change, or the biggest noticeable change, would be 20%. That's where even 3 per card units, you get an additional one. But it's nice to have for sure. M40 RCL Jeeps, loadout to 10 rounds. I assume this is meant as a standardization, probably because South Africa is gonna get some kind of recoilless Jeep. But should affect stuff like all M40 RCLs. Those are no, hold on. These ones, yeah. They had 20. I guess 20 was maybe a bit too much. The Raven is gonna get a price nerf to 160. It'll still have its crazy stealth and ECM, but at least it's gonna be more expensive. The US airplay can be very oppressive, and the Ravens, being so strong, is even noticeable in blue mixed decks, where I also end up using it very successfully. It's really not a huge change, given that you only buy 1 per game anyway. But it hurts more if you lose it. It means you have to wait longer until you can call it out. So it's something. It's a small nerf, without like suddenly completely changing the way US airplay is gonna be played. The Harrier GR7 is gonna get its veterancy changed, so we can get 2 on veteran, just like the Q5D. That should really help with the consistency of the paveways. Ever since the laser guided bombs got nerfed, so they don't have 100% hit rate anymore, especially the Harrier GJ7 has been in a bit of a sad state. You know, missing like half of the bombs, and with the bombs being 1080, they have a very small blast radius, so very often if you roll a miss, it means just literally doing nothing, whereas the bigger laser guided bombs like these or on the Kerners, even if you miss, there's a good chance you will still deal some damage that is not insignificant. So yeah, that doesn't of course make it always hit all of the bombs, so it's not gonna be like it used to be. It also used to be 100 points, by the way, but it should make it significantly better and be a more consistent anti-tank option. And if you choose to run it, it's a decent multi-role to hunt helos. So that is something that actually is a bit awkward sometimes with Commonwealth, because unlike most other decks, your bombers, your anti-tank planes that you typically run aren't really multi-role. You know, if you look at the Kehu, let's do it like this. Typically you would run the Kehu, no aim-9s. For bombers you would run the F111, no aim-9s. Your seat that you would typically use, Voodoo, no aim-9s. You can use the Seat Harrier or Sea Harrier, but it has no stealth, so it's not particularly amazing. GS7 was sometimes still run, not very often, but very often your only aim-9 sources were ASFs, and in not all games you would have ASFs before you would buy something like this. ASFs are typically used reactionary or to protect your already existing bombers, but you know, it means that you have an aim-9 or like an SRAM plane at the ready, not just if you already have an ASF. Because you would generally not buy this to hunt helos, of course, but if you already bought this for something else, it means that you also always have the option to then send something out to kill a helo. Challenger 2, availability changed from 3 to 2. I mean, it is gonna nerf Commonwealth, yes, but it is, even if we ignore the availability, arguably the best super heavy. I would say maybe not anymore, but it is one of the best ones for sure. While the only one with 23 armor, the main reason why I think it might not necessarily be the best is the speed of only 60 km/h, which means it's harder to smoke micro, etc. with it, or just maneuver around in general. It's not a massively low speed, but it's the lowest of all the super heavies. I think the Bass also has 60. In any case, it's still on in the upper part of all the super heavies at the very least, and that's definitely deserved. Challenger 1 Mark II has its HE gun fixed. It actually used to have 8 rate of fire on its gun, on its HE gun, and 7 on the AP gun. It used to use a copy of the Challenger 1 Mark III's gun, but it's also gonna get its price reduced from 120 to 110. Might look a bit crazy if you compare Challenger 1 Mark I and 1 Mark II now, but you know, for one you have to keep in mind this one is also in mech, the 1 Mark I. And buffing it would be a huge buff to Blue Mech as well. But this is a substantial buff, and while you do get 2 AP for 5 points, which seems again crazy, you have to keep in mind you only have 7 RPM, right? So if you have a low RPM gun, the AP you get for 5 points or something is worth less than if you had a 13 RPM gun, right? So it's actually not that huge of a buff. It is significant, but not like absolutely crazy. And the other thing is the Challenger 1 Mark I is arguably still a bit overpriced anyway, I'd reckon, because the low speed and low rate of fire just together make, you know, having just low speed or just low rate of fire is bad enough, but having low speed on top of low rate of fire makes the low rate of fire, you know, be even more impactful. Because typically if you have low rate of fire, you would like peekaboo, go in and out of cover, but with low speed you can't really do that very well. And it makes the low rate of fire hurt even more. But yeah, this should be a pretty good change. The probably biggest change for Commonwealth is SAS. They're gonna be price reduced from 35 to 30, because they're just not quite on the same level as LSTR or Decoys. You know, they only have an 84, no Vampire or Apilas, and the A Stinger, which in my opinion, is worse than an Igla. But I think in a deck like Commonwealth is possibly better because of 5HE versus 4HE. It's more important since not few of your AA systems have more than 5HE. Only really the ADATs and Stormer. Whereas on Redfor you have OSAs, you have Taurs, they all have 7HE, right? Still though, they also have just basic assault rifle, no SMG or carbine. And they also get Saxons and Stalwarts as ground transports, finally. And that is the biggest part that massively helps with the Commonwealth AA that's just so awkward. Mostly against helicopters, not so much against planes. And yep. And of course you get 9 of them now. Leclerc, it's gonna be 2 per card. Again, one of the best super heavies. Oh, now also 2 per card. Nerf to Euroco, of course. Deserved, for sure. M270 LMLRS, no longer. Actually, it's supposed to say LRM, I think. Yeah, it's called LRM. M270 LRM, no longer in mech. Also makes sense. Eurocom mech, granted, it's gonna take a nerf from that, but it wasn't a top. Like it shouldn't rely on LRM anyway, in my opinion. Mech decks. MX10 RC from 30 to 40 points. It's honestly, it's still gonna be a very good unit in my opinion, but it's of course a very, very, very significant nerf both to Eurocore and to blue mix decks. Most notably, honestly, I think the deck that is maybe even impacted most is blue mech, because this is blue mech's prominent way to make up for the fact that it's a mech deck, that it's slow. And this way it can, for one, sort of keep up with stuff like Eurocore, but also just wreck a lot of normal non-mech decks in the motorized department. And this nerf should hopefully tone that down a good bit. Kerners from 135 to 150. I think doesn't really surprise anyone either. It's just an absolutely dominant plane, ridiculously impactful. And yeah. The end tag is now normal, small instead of normal. That should be this one. What about the other ferrets? Yeah, this one is small. Thank God. Obviously, it's not very impactful, but I assume it's maybe does South Africa maybe also use ferrets? I don't know. Tiger is now 140 instead of 120. It's obviously because while the weaponry doesn't look amazing at first glance, all of these get essentially buffed or like improved, so to speak, because of the stealth that allows you to be a lot more aggressive, appear out of nowhere and massively reduce the amount of time your opponent can react to this unit. So it makes sense. Peace front price from 2 to 1. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to mean cards, so you only get 1 card now as well. Not a massive nerf, but sometimes coalitions with West Germany in them tend to really be oppressive with the amount of peace shrines they get. They reload fast, they're affordable. Not amazingly survivable, but survivable enough. So that can actually be a bit oppressive sometimes. And given that they're only 100 points, and typically with planes, trading a 100-point unit, trading a 100-point plane for a 100-point tank, not ideal. Unless, it suddenly allows you to completely wreck your opponent, right? But typically, if you ignore context like that, you don't want to really trade your planes like that because you have obviously much, much lower availability. But with 4 per card, these trades, or like having 4 of these available, these trades of trading like a peace shrine for like a medium or a medium heavy tank, suddenly not that bad anymore. And that was kind of an issue, honestly. The West German mortar got nerfed from 30 to 35. It is kind of the mortar is kind of ridiculous. It's the only 580 mortar that costs less than 40 points, and it has the same availability. Kind of a crazy mortar. It does have garbage autonomy and speed, which is not to be underestimated, honestly, because it means that counter-battering these is actually a viable option. But kind of deserved since it has the exact same stats. The K1 is now in Marines. This, admittedly, not a huge change. I mean, it is a huge change, even for Blue Dragons and South Korea Marines. But the deck that benefits the most from it is going to be Bluefor Marines. Bluefor Marines already certainly not a top tier deck, but formidable. You know, you get stuff like G95. I mean, I can just you don't see it on the left at the moment, but you can see it on the right when I select the units. You get like pivots. You get a Crotal. Your supporter already looks decent. You get a M110s, you know, as artillery that are not too bad. You get Hawk Whip 3. Or no, if you want to get a good mortar. This is a prototype, but you know, you have some good AA options. Your artillery isn't so strong, although you do get the large too. You get this, but tanks were typically weakness, which they probably should be. But while you don't get like suddenly heavy tanks or something, you do get now the K1, which fills your all-around medium at least. You still get like AMX 10 and Recon type. You get good shock Recon infantry. You get Hachinanas, I believe. And your infantry type also looks pretty strong. You get Commander Marines, Panthers. Their prototype. You get obviously all kinds of manpads. Where are they? And of course, Rima 85, your main shock infantry. So you have some strong options there. Main weaknesses are actually kind of the planes, because Marine plane, or the Marine spec is the only spec that has restricted access to planes. So your only good ASF is really the Tomcat. You get still get the corners, which also got nerfed, and of course the nerfed MX10. But yeah, it could potentially be like the next OP blue deck, but I don't quite think so. It kind of also depends on what South Africa does, and I'm more concerned about South Africa suddenly giving blue mech access to wheeled transports and such. Next up, the South Korean K200. Availability fixed to the KM113. Where am I? Where is it? Am I blind? Oh, I still have Marine selected. There it is. Might sound... It's actually quite impactful, honestly, again. Because the one unit that it ridiculously affected, like that it affected to kind of a ridiculous extent. It's not even the Sochung Su, right? They have same availability. But typically, you can actually see it here. Base Sochung Su are affected. Not a huge deal, right? You lose 5 per card. Yeah, okay, sure. The unit that really got screwed by it were the Yebigun, right? 38 in the basic 5-pointer, 24 in the K200. If you now get full availability in the K200, that massively buffs this card of reservists. And makes them like a really good option. Because 24 of these reservists, actually you ran out fairly quickly. Maybe you should remember seeing some of my Blue Dragons matches from recently. That really allows you to, you know, have just a single card for spam mutual infantry, where before you would also, in my opinion, have to run Sochung Su in the K200 as well. So this should be actually quite nice buff. And that's the Bluefor changes. On to Redfor now. Let me just see if the screen region is fine. Okay, so Eastern Bloc, 10% availability bonus. I think basically same story as before. LSTR, you get 1 additional per card. Right, LSTR 8 and 6, now you get 9 and 7, which is nice. Like a Perota, all the infantry, you get an additional Wilk, which is honestly, Wilk is also really nice. M2 Wilk, if you download, you get 7 as well. So yeah, should be cool. Baltic Front loses its availability bonus, which means where's the Baltic deck? Which means you only get 16 Yakari 90, 16 and 12. Right, yeah. You get 12 Panzer Yakari 90. Most importantly, you get only 6 spikes instead of 4. Same with the Wilks, of course. So yeah, 6 OSAs instead. Should be good. All the basic T72s are now 40 points, from 45 to 40. Should make them a more viable, like, cheap tank option. Especially, I think Eastern Bloc kind of needs it. Soviets, Baltic, and Yugos Entente, maybe not that affected. They typically have other units to like fill that sort of role, but should be nice for Eastern Bloc. The Metis M speed got changed to Milan speed. It is a pretty slow ATGM. I hope that maybe they'll also, or maybe it wasn't mentioned, but also the basic Metis is gonna be affected by this, because all of the basic Metis squads that are regular, this is the Strelci Podalansky, I'm sorry for butchering that, as well as basic Onostraki, they both got price buff to 15 points. And the Leichte Schützen got their veterancy fixed. If you look at Eastern Bloc, Leichte Schützen now actually coming on hardened and veteran, increased availability, and hopefully increased meta speed are not going to be a more viable option. As well as, of course, the base Gonos and the Strelci. They're going to be more akin to what light riflemen are. The Weidera 2 is going to get its availability fixed, because right now it actually gives you an availability reduction. And the Weidera 2, while it is nice, it's not like an amazing 50-point transport, whereas stuff like the KAFV25, which is better, doesn't give an availability reduction. So you get 20 and 16 instead of 16 and 12, plus availability bonus, you get 22 and 18. Should be pretty nice. BMP1 back to 10 points. This is one of the biggest changes of this whole changelog, because this is going to make Eastern Bloc, or like East Germany, and most importantly Eastern Bloc, significantly stronger again, and gives them finally one, or like another tool that is kind of unique to them on top of just LSTR. Because at the moment, LSTR is really the only fancy thing Eastern Bloc has. Entente or Baltic Front basically have all the other stuff, but better. And even Baltic Front has Ericos, which are arguably better, depending on how you look at it. So that should be really, really nice. It also is gonna impact, of course, Redfor Mixed, Redfor Mega, and Redfor Armored, which could be very, very strong deck, as you'll see in a bit. Leichte Schützen, I mentioned, East German LCR are going to be in megas as well, just like, you know, FJB, Fallschirm MiG-29, a lot of airborne special forces, but of course they only had access to the Heinz. But still, again, should be pretty nice. Gives Eastern Bloc mech something more unique as opposed to Redfor mech, so that should be cool. MiG-23B availability, it should be BN, I think, isn't it a BN? I think it's a BN, yeah, I think they mean the BN. Availability increased from 2 to 3. Hold on. Can you see this? No, you cannot. I just got asked if I'm playing against someone in ranked on an alt. Curious. Okay, hold on. Let me pause the recording for a second. Alright, back to it. Yeah, the MiG-23BN. For 95 points, it's not hugely amazing, but the biggest issue was really that it's super card. Because very, very often these 90-ish point planes, 90, 100 point bombers and stuff, they had the same availability as, you know, 120, 130 point bombers. And if you only get 2 of these units anyway, you might as well get the one that is more expensive, because you still get the same amount. So there was like this kind of gap between like the very cheap planes and the 140 point planes, where a lot of planes in between had the same availability as like the more expensive ones, so there was no reason to run them, even if for the cost they weren't really too bad. So same with the MiG-23BN. Maybe for 95 points it's not amazing, but the loadout, survivability, etc. isn't too horrible. The thing that makes this plane garbage is that it's 2 per card, and the 3 per card, again, it's not going to be like a Bloc 5 or an Aardvark, but compared to those, it's 3 per card at least, and cheaper. So it is going to be an okay option, especially since the Syria just isn't very survivable. You may want to run this on top, and it actually gives Redfor and Eastern Bloc while it's not an amazing cluster plane, I think one of a more capable one, a better one that is actually worth using. Next up, China. CDQ 62 and 62-1 both got their price reduced by 5 points. Especially the cheaper one, it's only 20 points, but it has horrible range, horrible accuracy, horrible AP, and 3 armor. So that should be a fun little, good little buff. It's kind of similar to the M41A1, that is 10 points, but that thing also has garbage autonomy. But you know, should be fun. Same with this one. Yeah, should give them some nice cheap recon options, especially in motor deck or mech decks where you really want to spam those. Should be good. PDC 59 from 50 to 40. This could be a bit spicy, but what you have to keep in mind, of course, is garbage optics. It's very slow, not very well armored, has virtually no stabilizer, only 6 RPM. So this gives you a better way to deal with like medium and medium-ish heavy tanks at like the 1000-ish meter ranges. It's not going to be a forest brawler because it doesn't have the speed or the stabilizer for it, but it's going to be fighter for like these, you know, 1000 meter engagements between forests and stuff like that. So it should be interesting for that. Let's see how that plays out, because before nobody really used this. Now maybe people will. The Bantang Fagot is gonna have access to the VTT line. So you get the VTT 323, the Susong Po, and most importantly the Hwasung Chong in your Fagots. So the nice thing is here now you can get, while the Fagots are of course not amazing, they're not useless. But it means you can get your Hwasung Chong, which is nice to have, and your ATGM squad in one single card. Whereas before, if you wanted to have the Hwasung Chong, you had to have the Bo Chung Su, and while the combination is fine, you didn't always really want that. So this should be pretty cool. The Type 59 ones are gonna get quite the price buff. The basic one is gonna get from 40 to 30, which could be absolutely crazy. Redfor mixed could completely, you know, be out of the ballpark. But it's gonna be, it could be really strong. What you have to keep in mind is though, it does have bad optics, which is even worse than poor optics. It's slow, gets one shot by a lot of stuff, doesn't have a lot of range. But with the KBVT and high AP but low accuracy and low range, it could be like a really good close range forest brawler against like 5-pointer spam, rifleman spam. The KBVT really helps dealing with like all those 5-pointers. Could be pretty good, could be crazy good. And the one with the Strela is also gonna get a price buff, although I don't think this one is gonna be too impactful. Then again, who knows? It does have more range and more accuracy and more AP as well. Next up, B5 is gonna be 2 per card again. Yeah, there. That's really all there is to it. In North Korea, now you get, that thing will be 3 per card now. So if you wanna really be meme around, if you really wanna meme around with North Korea, there you go. Finnish PSV from 65 to 75. Yeah, arguably more impactful than the M84AN, given that it was unprototyped. Yeah, it is actually pretty crazy, right? If you compare this to the Verkenning, you get like, you lose 2 RPM, but you get 2 AP and 2 armor. And the 2 armor means you suddenly don't get one shot by a lot of stuff anymore. You have like horrible stabilizer, but a 2 AP is so much more impactful than a rate of fire, because it means that at max range you can deal a lot more damage, or damage at all, to like a lot of tanks that the Verkenning couldn't. So the Verkenning will only start shooting if they're closer, and then suddenly you get spotted. So in practice, the PSV could shoot at stuff and kill stuff earlier and at longer ranges, even though it had low rate of fire. And having lower caliber, even though it's not a huge deal, means it also has lower noise value, so even worse to harder to detect. But yeah, in practice, the PSV just was a lot more impactful in a lot of ways. MiG-29, I think we'll need to go to the deck building there. The Finnish MiG-29 is gonna get nerfed pretty hard, deservedly so. You only well, it's gonna be on 125 points now, and you only get it on veteran. which you might think is harsh. You only get 2 missiles, but let's not forget they are ripple fire, which means, and you have 40% ECM, which means you immediately shoot them, immediately evac, and like, planes are gonna have a very, very hard time to get even enough missiles in to kill you in the first place, if they can shoot back. And of course, it means you don't have to fly as deep into enemy AA either. But yeah, I think everyone knows, or hopefully everyone knows how ridiculous this plane was, so I don't really want to talk too much about it. If you really want to know more about how strong it is, take a look at my tier list videos. The KT is also gonna get nerfed. I accidentally saved it. The XA1, oh, voice crack, Jesus. The XA185 KT, sorry, it's early in the morning. 20 points. Yep. It's the, honestly, I think it's gonna be strong, very strong, especially since on units on Panzer Yakari 90 you don't notice it as much. It's mainly gonna be really noticeable if you spam it with the Yakari 90. But honestly, I still think it's gonna be a. It's honestly gonna be an S tier unit. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm not saying it should be nerfed further. I am saying we should wait and see. But I predict it's still gonna be like, you're still gonna use all 2 cards of them, and probably still gonna use a card of them with the Yakari 90 if I had to guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but that is my prediction. But the goal, of course, is not, I hope not, to make this unit unusable. Then next up, the whole 84 line, the M84 line. Let's actually do it like this. They're all gonna be nerfed to 8 RPM. 84N, of course, very strong recon tank, very, very strong recon tank. Should be still very strong, but I think the most impactful is gonna be on the M84A. And it is not just because it's the unprototype tank, of course, so mixed red decks are also gonna feel this nerf. But I think it's gonna be a lot more impactful to the deck building as well. Because I think with the nerf, you can't as consistently make up for having nothing between this and your super heavy. You might be more inclined to now put in the base Vihor or the Jack T72 as well. With a lower RPM, you can't guarantee to get a second shot out at the same time or before the enemy tanks, so you can't brawl in CQC as well anymore. So I have a feeling that it's also going to affect deck building a lot more than you might think. That said, I still think it's going to be a very, very strong unit. It still has the speed, it still has the amazing accuracy and stabilizer, and the 19 AP. That is, a very good threshold to be at. So I think it's going to be still strong, but you probably might see a lot more base Vihors or T72Ss, or maybe people will run the T72 M1M. We never know. But I think it's still going to be a good unit to put in. But yeah, the recon tank I don't think is as hit as much as this one is. This one is certainly a lot more impacted by it. And last but by no means least, the Super Gallop is gonna get nerfed from 900 kmh to 750. Finally. It always was a kind of a ridiculous plane if you compare this to the Kehu. Oh, that's Anzac. Like for 5 points more. The R60Ms are nice, but let's be real, not that impactful. But the fact that you're just 300 kmh faster for 5 points more is so ridiculous. It still is very, very good, but it has only 60 seconds time over target. And with a lower speed, this might actually come into play, because sometimes you have to loiter for a bit if the enemy is like trying to hide their tank. And with 750 kmh, it means that you need longer time to actually get to the tank from both your spawn and your loitering point. So yeah, actually gonna be impactful that it has low time over target, and that's the changelog that Eugen posted. What happens next? Well, we'll be back at the end of August with hopefully some interesting news to share. It's gonna be a long wait. It's gonna be a lot more campaigns maybe coming. I don't know yet. Yeah. Other than that, nothing really crazy new, I think. Silver lining is that they're gonna be able to organize beta testing session later in the summer, which is presumably not a public beta. I guess we have to see what it is. If they do it like they do with Steel Division, I think you'll be able to actually take a look at gameplay and set videos before it's publicly released, I think. But I don't know what their plan is with beta testing. Yeah, I think that's all the news. There's, if there's gonna be some typos or something, or they, what, let's just refresh the page, see if they fixed some typos or something with the peace Rhine. They did not. This is a splash from 221. In any case, let me know what you think in the comments or in my Discord or something. I'll obviously leave the link to this in the description. And yeah, I'm excited for it. I think these changes are quite good. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you found it interesting, my insight on it. And I'll hopefully see you next time. Later.